There are men who leave a conversation, and she forgets them before she gets home. And there are men who leave a conversation, and she's still thinking about them 3 weeks later without fully understanding why. The difference is not what they said, it's what they are. What we're covering today are 7 specific psychological and behavioral qualities rooted in Stoic philosophy and confirmed by neuroscience that make certain men genuinely unforgettable to women. One of them involves something that happens in the final moments of an interaction that determines everything about how she carries it afterward. Another involves a Stoic practice that Marcus Aurelius engaged in daily that produced a quality in him that people around him described as impossible to forget. And the 7th, the climax, is the deepest psychological truth about why certain men become genuinely unforgettable. It will reframe everything. Stay with me. Here's the honest premise. Being unforgettable is not about being impressive. It is not about saying the most interesting things or having the most remarkable life or performing the most confident version of yourself. It is about creating a specific quality of experience in another person's emotional memory, an experience so rare, so genuinely different from the ordinary texture of their social world that their brain continues returning to it long after the interaction ended. The Stoics understood this. Seneca wrote, "Convince by your life, not by your performance, by the genuine, consistent, accumulated evidence of who you actually are." 7 qualities, real philosophy, real psychology. Let's get into it. Bold claim. The timing of when you end an interaction determines how it is stored in her emotional memory more powerfully than anything that happened during it, and the Stoics had a principle that explains exactly why. Here is the neuroscience. Nobel Prize-winning psychologist Daniel Kahneman documented what he called the peak-end rule, the finding that human memory stores experiences not as continuous recordings, but as 2 specific data points: the emotional peak of the experience and how it ended. Everything in the middle is largely averaged out, applied to social interaction. The moment of highest genuine connection during a conversation, combined with how the conversation concluded, determines how she remembers the entire experience. Not how long it lasted, not everything that was covered, those 2 moments. The Stoic principle here is kairos, the concept of the right moment. The Stoics distinguish between chronos, ordinary sequential time, and kairos, the specific, significant moment that carries disproportionate weight. The man who has developed the awareness to recognize when an interaction has reached its natural peak and who has the discipline to let it end there rather than extending it past its best moment creates a memory that her brain keeps returning to. Scenario. A man named Adrian, 48, had developed genuine social awareness through years of Stoic practice, was in a conversation with a woman named Isabel at a gathering. The conversation had reached a genuinely remarkable moment, real laughter, a moment of authentic connection, something that felt genuinely alive between them. Most men would have continued, extended the conversation, tried to maintain the height of that moment. Adrian said, "This has been one of the best conversations I've had in a long time. I don't want to dilute it. I'm going to let it be exactly what it was." And he ended it, warmly, completely, at the peak. Isabel thought about that conversation for 2 weeks, not because of what was said, because of the specific quality of a man who valued the conversation enough to protect it from diminishment. What most men do wrong, they extend interactions past their natural peak, trying to hold on to what was real, and in doing so, dilute the exact quality they were trying to preserve. What actually works? Develop the awareness to recognize the peak, and the discipline to honor it by letting the interaction conclude there. Leave her wanting more, not through strategy, but through genuine respect for what the moment actually was. Bold claim, genuine, complete, undivided presence has become so rare in human interaction that a man who offers it becomes immediately, powerfully distinct from every other person in her social world. The neuroscience is direct. When another person gives us their genuine, undivided attention, when we can feel that we are the only thing occupying their awareness in this moment, the brain releases oxytocin and dopamine simultaneously. The bonding and reward systems activate together. The experience is neurologically similar to physical touch. We are wired to respond powerfully to being genuinely seen, and we are currently living in the era of the most fragmented, distracted, half-present attention in human history. The man who puts his phone away, genuinely, not just physically, and gives another person his complete, unhurried, fully engaged awareness is offering something that has become genuinely uncommon, something her nervous system recognizes immediately as different, something her emotional memory stores with disproportionate significance. Marcus Aurelius practiced this deliberately. His meditations are filled with reminders to himself to be fully present in each interaction, not thinking about the next thing, not processing the last thing, but genuinely inhabiting the current moment with the person in front of him. Mini story. A woman named Priya had been on 12 first dates in the previous year, all of them with successful, interesting, attractive men. She described the experience to her therapist with a specific frustration. They're all there, but not really there, checking their phones, thinking about how they're coming across, not actually in the conversation. Then she had coffee with a man named Thomas. He put his phone face down on the table when they sat down, not to make a point, as a simple, unremarkable act. And then he looked at her, actually looked, with the specific quality of someone who found her genuinely interesting and was in no hurry to be anywhere else. Priya said, "I felt seen. I know that sounds simple, but I don't think I've felt that from someone I was attracted to in years." Thomas became the reference point. Every interaction afterward got compared to that one. Bold claim, generic warmth is forgettable. Specific, accurate observation is unforgettable. And the difference between them determines everything about how she carries the interaction afterward. The psychology here is rooted in what researchers call self-referential neural processing, the documented finding that accurate, specific acknowledgement of who someone is activates significantly deeper emotional engagement than general compliments or generic positive statements. Generic. "You're really interesting," requires zero observation, could be said to anyone. Forgotten before she gets home. Specific, the way you think through problems, you start from the edge of things and work inward. "I've been watching you do it this whole conversation. It's unusual, and I find it remarkable." That sentence required genuine observation. It could only be said about her. It proves that you were paying close enough attention to see something specific. And being seen specifically, accurately by someone who was actually watching is one of the most emotionally significant experiences available. Scenario: a man named Vincent was talking with a woman named Elena. He had been genuinely observing her throughout their conversation, not performing observation, actually watching how she thought. At a natural moment, he said, "You do something interesting. When you're not sure about something, you get quieter rather than louder. Most people do the opposite. I respect that about how you think." Elena carried that sentence for weeks, not because it was flattering, because it was true, because he had seen something real in her that required genuine attention to notice. The Stoic principle. Marcus Aurelius wrote about the discipline of seeing things as they actually are, not as we wish them to be, not as would be convenient, but with honest, clear perception. Applied to seeing people, the man who looks clearly and says honestly what he sees creates an experience that no amount of practiced charm can replicate. Bold claim. The man who holds his genuine position when she pushes back, warmly, without defensiveness, with complete ease, becomes far more memorable than the man who agrees with everything she says. And the psychology behind this is one of the most counterintuitive truths in attraction science. Research on self-concept clarity, the psychological stability of a person's sense of their own identity, consistently shows that people with high self-concept clarity are rated as more attractive, more trustworthy, and more worth pursuing than those whose self-concept shifts based on social pressure. When a man changes his position the moment she disagrees, when he softens his view or abandons it entirely to reduce friction, he communicates something his ego doesn't intend, that his identity is not stable enough to survive disagreement, that her approval is more important to him than his own perspective. She doesn't consciously think he lacks self-concept clarity. She feels there's no one substantial here to actually connect with. The Stoic principle is Epictetus's foundational teaching on the dichotomy of control. What other people think of your views is outside your control. Your actual views, what you genuinely believe, are within it. The Stoic man speaks from what is within his control, genuine conviction. He releases what is outside it, how his conviction is received. Mini story. A man named Lawrence was on a third date with a woman named Diana. She said something he genuinely disagreed with and watched his face to see what he would do. Most men she had dated either agreed immediately or argued defensively. Lawrence said, "I see it differently, and I think the difference is worth talking about." Then explained his actual view, calmly, with genuine interest in her perspective, without needing her to agree. Diana told her friend, "He pushed back on me, nicely, but actually pushed back. I've been thinking about it for days. I can't decide if he's right, but I can't stop thinking about the conversation." The disagreement made her think. Being made to think made him unforgettable. Bold claim, the man who has a genuinely full life, who sometimes becomes less available not as strategy but as simple fact, creates a specific psychological response in women that constant availability never produces. The psychology here draws from reactance theory and scarcity research. When something that has been present becomes less immediately available, the brain recalibrates its assessment of its value. This is not manipulation. It is a documented feature of human psychology that operates regardless of anyone's intentions. The man who is genuinely busy, genuinely invested in his own work, his own friendships, his own development, naturally creates periods of reduced availability, not as a technique, as a consequence of having a life that doesn't stop when she appears in it. That natural scarcity, the simple fact of a man whose world doesn't revolve around her specifically, produces curiosity, the specific desire to understand what is occupying someone when you are not. The Stoic foundation. Epictetus wrote about investing in what is within your control, your own actions, your own development, your own character. The man who follows this teaching genuinely has less time for anxious availability because he is genuinely occupied with his own becoming. Scenario: a man named James had been in consistent contact with a woman named Sophia. Then, not strategically, simply because his work entered an intensive period, he became less immediately available. Responses that had come within an hour took a day. Plans he would have suggested immediately got delayed, Sophia noticed. And for the first time in weeks, she reached out first. "I realized I was thinking about you more when you were less available," she told him later. "I couldn't figure out if that was embarrassing or just honest. It was just honest. And genuinely, it was just psychology." Bold claim, the man who ends interactions, conversations, evenings, text exchanges before they reach their natural exhaustion point, and who does so without extensive explanation, creates a specific quality of incompleteness that the human brain is compelled to return to. The neuroscience. The brain has a documented preference for completion. Unfinished experiences, what psychologists call the Zeigarnik effect, are stored more actively than completed ones. They stay accessible in working memory. They get returned to. They produce the specific experience of thinking about something without fully understanding why. The man who says, "I need to go, but I want to continue this conversation," and then actually goes, without hedging, without extending the goodbye indefinitely, leaves her with something unfinished, something her brain keeps returning to because it hasn't been resolved. This is not a manipulation. It is the natural consequence of respecting both your own time and the quality of the interaction, of valuing what existed enough not to extend it past its best point. Stoic principle, kairos again. The right moment to stop is as important as the right moment to begin. The man who has developed the awareness to recognize when an ending serves the connection better than continuation creates experiences that linger in precisely the way he hopes. This is the truth reveal, the deepest reason, the one that contains all the others, and that most men never understand because they've never been taught to pursue it. Bold claim, the most unforgettable thing a man can create in a woman's experience is not attraction to him. It is a heightened experience of herself, the specific, remarkable feeling of being more fully, more honestly, more completely herself in his presence than she is anywhere else. Here is the psychology that makes this the deepest truth. Human beings associate feelings with the context that produce them. When we feel more alive, more interesting, more genuinely ourselves in a specific person's presence, we associate that experience with them. We don't think, that conversation made me think better. We think, something about him makes me think better. The feeling attaches to the person who created the conditions for it. The man who creates conditions for a woman to be more fully herself through genuine presence, specific observation, real engagement, the safety of consistent acceptance, becomes associated in her emotional memory with the experience of being her best, most alive, most genuine self. And we don't forget the people who give us that experience. We return to them, we think about them, we find ourselves wanting more access to whoever produced the most genuine version of our own experience. This is what the Stoics were pointing toward when they wrote about genuine virtue producing genuine connection. The man who has done the internal work, who is genuinely grounded, genuinely curious, genuinely present, genuinely himself, creates an environment in every interaction where the people around him can be more genuinely themselves. Not because he is trying to create that environment, because genuine character is expansive rather than contracting. Because a man who is at peace with himself creates space for others to be at peace with themselves. Mini story. A woman named Clara had spent years trying to understand what made certain men unforgettable and others forgettable. Not in an analytical way, but in the lived personal way of someone trying to understand her own experience. She finally articulated it to a close friend after an evening with a man named Edward that had stayed with her for weeks. I've been trying to figure out what it is. He's not the most handsome, not the most successful, not the most charming in any conventional sense. She paused, but when I'm with him, I'm more of myself than I am anywhere else. I'm funnier. I'm more honest. I think better. I say things I didn't know I thought until I was saying them to him. Another pause. I think that's it. I can't stop thinking about him because I can't stop thinking about who I am when I'm around him. And I want more access to that version of myself. That is the deepest truth in this entire video. The men who become genuinely unforgettable are not the men who were most impressive. They are the men who created the conditions through genuine character, genuine presence, genuine internal work for women to be most genuinely themselves. And we never forget the people who give us that. Here is the question I want to leave you with. Of these 7 qualities, the peaked ending, complete presence, specific observation, genuine disagreement, natural scarcity, respectful incompleteness, and the expansive quality that makes her more herself, which one do you most consistently fail to offer? Not which sounds most interesting. Which one, if you're completely honest, represents the biggest gap between the man you currently are and the man whose energy creates genuinely unforgettable interactions? Because that gap is not a verdict, it is a direction. And the daily practice of moving in that direction, through the consistent, honest, ongoing work of becoming more genuinely yourself, is what the most unforgettable men are doing that everyone else isn't. Drop in the comments which quality you're going to work on first. I read every single one. And if today gave you something genuinely worth carrying into your life, subscribe. Every week, we bring this level of depth and honesty to the questions that actually matter. See you in the next one.